morning, ladies and gentlemen and non-binary students. You are all very welcome here, and this is week one of the cultural geography of the United Kingdom, and I did this course completely live last year, but this time I decided to do it in this kind of hybrid method that I do my other courses. So if you are surprised that no materials are yet uploaded, they will be, don't worry. We are also going to have live meetings every other week, more or less, and some activities on Moodle. So I hope you'll be able to follow this course. What I mean by cultural geography, what we are going to discuss here, we'll be using quite a lot of maps, but also quite a lot of materials pertaining to culture, meaning historical monuments and places connected with some important events or people in the history of Britain. But today I'd like to cover with you this kind of geography proper, the physical geography, the maps and the names of the mountains and rivers and islands and all these things that are really the backbone of our discussion for the remainder of the semester. So you'll see some maps. Actually, normally at the end of this week you would do a kind of handout exercise with the map, with the blank map, and you'd be supposed to put the names on the blank map. Unfortunately, it's in Warsaw, hidden in my drawer. But as soon as I get to Warsaw, I'll try to have it back, to have it scanned, and then you can do it. Otherwise, well, we have other maps, so let's begin. I believe that some of you probably have visited Britain already. If not, I hope you will be able to do it as soon as the pandemic situation changes. If it is indeed the case, I hope that you'll be able to visit Britain again. I do hope to do it myself as soon as possible. I have been to Britain many times and many places, so I'll be using a bit of my own experience here, but perhaps at a slightly later stage. So most of you are probably Polish, so you may ask yourself, is the United Kingdom larger than Poland or other way around? And in fact, the size of the United Kingdom is significantly smaller than the territory of Poland. The United Kingdom is approximately, as I could find online, 243,610 square kilometers, where Poland is more than 312 square kilometers. So the United Kingdom is almost 78% of the size of Poland. So Poland is significantly larger, almost a quarter of the size larger. However, the population of Britain is larger than the population of Poland by something like 27.5 million people. So we have 27.5 million people living in the United Kingdom. More people than in Poland. In Poland it's around 38.3 million now. So calculate the population of the United Kingdom. Speaking of Great Britain, England, the United Kingdom, these are all the names that are sometimes used as synonyms, but in fact they are quite specific. And here is a little map that actually tells you what is what. The most inclusive, the broadest term used in geography is the British Isles. The British Isles. It means all the islands around Great Britain. So it includes Ireland, it includes all the little islands and archipelagos around Britain. So that's the most inclusive geographical term. The British Isles consist of, as I said, many islands, most of them quite small. The two largest ones are the island of Great Britain. So this is the geographical term. Great Britain is a geographical term. This is the island that houses England, Scotland and Wales. And the other big island is Ireland, which houses the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, which is in turn part of another construct, a political construct, called the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So the United Kingdom consists of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, and some more islands, especially the islands that are situated off the coast of Scotland. So first of all, three archipelagos: the Shetlands, the Orkneys and the Hebrides. The Hebrides are the most numerous, so they are further subdivided into Outer Hebrides and Inner Hebrides. So they are all part of the United Kingdom, as are some other islands situated off the coast of Great Britain. We'll talk about them in a little moment. There is one interesting exception, and this exception is relatively, well, mid-sized, let's say. It's not very small, it's not very large. Island between Ireland and Great Britain. This island is called the Isle of Man, and politically speaking, it is a crown dependency, so it is a kind of colony, let's say, of sorts to the United Kingdom, not fully integrated, but some sort of self-governing body. Although, of course, it is part of the British Isles. However, not geographically speaking of the United Kingdom, and even not of Great Britain, because it is a separate island. So here we have a little map that illustrates it all. In casual speech, these words are used as synonyms. So unless you say England when you mean Great Britain, perhaps it's not the best idea. But speaking of Britain and the United Kingdom, I'm going to use the word Britain and the term the United Kingdom more or less as synonyms, of course, bearing in mind somewhere at the back of my head that there is this part of Ireland, Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. However, it's not really part of Great Britain geographically. So there we go. And speaking of names, you are probably familiar with all kinds of names, and many of them derive from the period of Roman invasion. So the words like Anglia or Britannia, these are of Latin origin. They came with the Romans when the Romans invaded Britain at the turn of the Common Era. They had their names for the place they wanted to include in the Roman Empire, and some names have remained in popular usage, sometimes for, you might say, poetic reasons, patriotic reasons. Sometimes you can find them hidden in the names of institutions or local newspapers or other regional bodies. So let's look at some of those names. Probably the earliest of these names is the name Albion. Albion, coming from the Latin word albus, meaning white, refers to a very characteristic geographical feature of the southern coast of England, namely the white chalk cliffs, like the cliffs of Dover, the legendary, famous white cliffs of Dover. They have become inspirational in song, for example. There was a very famous song written around the time of the Second World War. So the white cliffs of Dover became a kind of focus for patriotism. And because they were white, they are the first feature that you notice if you travel from the continent to Britain via the shortest sea route, that is from Dover to Calais. If you ever traveled on a ferry to Britain, this is something you notice as the first thing. So Albion became a word to mean Great Britain, or more precisely England, and it's still used in this capacity today sometimes. The word Anglia, from which England derives partially, is also Latin. You may find it, for example, in the historical name of the Kingdom of East Anglia. This is a later, slightly later term referring to a Germanic tribe of Angles, like Anglo-Saxons, comprising of the Angles and the Saxons. So the Angles were a Germanic tribe that came to Great Britain right after the Romans, or just as the Romans were leaving, basically. So the word Anglia refers to the area where they lived, where they settled. The term Britannia also comes from Latin. This was originally the name of the Roman colony, of the Roman lands in Great Britain, but later on it became associated with the island of Great Britain, with the country itself, with the United Kingdom, especially after the unification of Scotland and England under the Stuarts after the death of Queen Elizabeth I. We also have some regional names that are still used locally and basically quite well known, like the term Caledonia. Caledonia is the Roman term for Scotland. So, for example, we have some local newspapers or local institutions as Caledonian something. Caledonia refers to Scotland. This is an old Latin name for Scotland. Actually, the word Scotia also derives from Latin, and it also can mean Scotland. Actually, formerly, it could also mean Ireland, because originally the Scoti were the Gaelic tribes. So when the Romans invaded, these were the subgroup of the Celts that spoke Gaelic languages. So the Irish Gaelic and Scottish Gaelic. These peoples were referred to as the Scoti by the Romans, so the place where they lived was called Scotia. Later on it became associated more with Scotland than with Ireland, especially that there was another term for Ireland, Hibernia. Hibernia, it derives from a Latin word meaning winter, because well, this was a cold place, and especially compared with the Mediterranean climate, and the Romans believed it was quite an inhospitable island, so they called it Hibernia. So we have Caledonia for Scotland, Hibernia for Ireland, not only the northern part. We'll talk about the internal division of Ireland later on. So what other parts? For example, Cambria. Cambria meaning Wales. So the Latin name for Wales is Cambria. It is reflected, for example, in the Cambrian Mountains in Wales. So it gets a little bit tricky here, because Cambria, spelled with an A, means Wales, but also at the same time there is a place in England called Cumbria. Cumbria, it's a Roman name for the area known also as the Lake District. When we talk about the counties of England, you will encounter the county of Cumbria, spelled with a U, not Cambria, spelled with an A. It gets a little bit tricky, so you just have to remember that Cambria with Cambrian Mountains is Wales, and Cumbria with a short U vowel is the Lake District. There are other places, for example, Cornubia, which means Cornwall, and also many names of little islands, like Monapia, the Isle of Man, or Mona, the Isle of Anglesey, that we are going to encounter in a little while, or Vectis, the Isle of Wight, Caesarea, the Isle of Jersey. You do not really need to know all of them, but just remember that the Romans really liked to name all the places they conquered. They, of course, also named the settlements that grew into cities later on. The name of London comes from Latin Londinium or Londonia, and many other names of cities either come from the Latin language, or they had some sort of equivalent, sometimes very different equivalent, in the Latin language spoken in Rome. For example, Eboracum, meaning York, or I don't know, like Vigornia, meaning Worcester. You do not have to know all these names, just bear in mind that there were many. Let's now look at some features of geography. The next map here shows you the main mountains in the United Kingdom. And the first thing about the geology of the British Isles is that these are old mountains. These are the mountains that are not very high. There are quite a lot of hills and uplands, but generally the mountain ranges are not especially high. The highest mountains, the mountains that exceed 1,000 meters in height, can be found in Scotland. Geologically, actually, Scotland has a different origin than England. They were joined together by the movement of land plates in the long history, of course, of those lands. Scottish mountains are probably the highest. We have the whole area known as Highland. So in the north of Scotland, we'll talk about it in a moment. The main mountain range are Grampian Mountains. Grampian Mountains, and this is where the highest peak in the United Kingdom is situated. It is called Ben Nevis. Ben Nevis, it is 1,343 meters high. There are also some more mountains around 1,000 meters. As I said, this is the most mountainous and rugged area really in the British Isles. The word Ben comes from a Scottish language, and you have many mountain peaks called by this term in Scotland. As you'll see in a moment, there are some Scottish words for the features of geography, and Ben, like Ben Nevis or Ben Lomond, for example, means the peak called Nevis Peak or something. What else do we have? We have the Southern Upland, which is the range of hills on the or across the border between England and Scotland. The longest peak and the highest mountains in England are more or less vertical line across the spine of Great Britain, and they are called the Pennants. The Pennants are old mountains, not very high but quite picturesque. There is especially the area called the Peak District, which is particularly attractive for tourism, for hiking, for example. The highest peak in England, however, is in Cumbria, so the Lake District, and it's called Scafell Pike. As you can see, below 1,000 meters in height. In Wales or Cambria, we have, as I said, Cambrian Mountains with the highest peak called Snowdon. This is another peak which is just over 1,000 meters in height, 1,085 meters in height. And there are some more peaks here on this map. The highest peaks in Northern Ireland, as you can see, and the highest peak on the Isle of Man. They are significantly lower, and generally the idea is that the mountains in Britain are not particularly high. The most mountainous areas would be in Scotland, Wales, and probably the Lake District, with some uplands or hills as well. We will talk about more names and more hill ranges when we move to specific locations. But even on this map, I hope you can see that the northwest of Great Britain has a higher elevation generally than the southeast. So we could even draw a line between the lowland zone in the southeast with the plains of southern and eastern England, and the highland zone, probably including Cornwall, and then the areas of Wales, and then the Pennines. So here we have the mountains, and we continue in a moment.